1150 AM WDEL.
Chris Tigani, NKS Distributing. He spread it around, man. Money, favors, trips, booze, all to get what he felt he needed for his company from politicians here in Delaware. As you heard here on 1150 AM WDEL, sentencing, 2 years. Just 1 month less than the prosecutors of the U.S. Attorney's Office were looking for. On the phone right now is the acting U.S. Attorney here in the state of Delaware, David Weiss. David, thanks for being on, sir.
Sure, Rick. Thanks for having me.
And we can set up a couple of things before the conversation. First of all, you're actually the first assistant, and you have served as interim after Colin Connolly left, and you've also served, I think, a couple of times as acting U.S. Attorney, haven't you?
That's correct. On any matter that the U.S. Attorney, the current U.S. Attorney, Charlie Oberle, is recused from, the first assistant typically steps in as the acting U.S. Attorney on that matter, and I've acted in that capacity with respect to Mr. Tigani.
I guess it's not too surprising with Charlie Oberle, having been State Attorney General, very, very well known here in Delaware, that anytime you have something of this nature here in the state of Delaware, you're going to have to recuse yourself. I mean, it makes sense to me because there's like 2 degrees of separation here in the state of Delaware.
Well, it is a small state, and I know that Charlie, once he took on the position here, certainly would have gone through the list of cases that we were working on, and the incoming U.S. Attorney makes a determination as to which things he thinks it's appropriate that he disassociate himself with, and he made that determination on this matter.
Getting to the Tigani case, how meaningful was it for you in your prosecution? And by the way, we should also mention Assistant U.S. Attorney Robert Kravitz was the lead prosecutor on the case, and he led the team on this, doing most of the heavy lifting, right?
That's absolutely correct. Rocky did a great job and made a powerful pitch to the court, both in terms of our written submission and at sentencing.
How meaningful was it that Chris Tigani said, yeah, I broke the law? If he hadn't confessed, would it have been extraordinarily difficult for a successful prosecution in this case?
Certainly the fact that there had been a record developed in the Chancery Court litigation involving Mr. Tigani and NKS and his father, I'd be less than candid if I didn't say that that gave us a pretty good roadmap as to certain things that have been going on, particularly with respect to illegal campaign contributions. Now, there's, even with that record, there's a lot more work that the FBI and Rocky had to undertake, and they did so. But that gave us an awfully good start.
Listening to the reports on WDEL and reading them in the paper as well, and as this continued, the questions that really occurred in my mind are those that a lot of people here in Delaware are wondering is, well, what about the politicians? We know that, sure, he was bundling campaign contributions, that he was illegally refunding employees of their campaign contributions. And then we read that the former Governor Minter, got a plane ride, and people were getting booze and tickets. Well, what about them? I know you can't talk about any ongoing investigation. I want my listeners to know that he really cannot talk about specific politicians and an ongoing investigation. But with all of that, if we can take this into the 30,000-foot view and pose the question a different way, perhaps you can give us some light on this. An investigation, and we'll pretend it's in Nebraska. Where you have something that somebody has made illegal campaign contributions, they confessed to it. In general, how does an investigation into the recipients of these funds proceed?
Well, you've got to take a hard look at anybody with whom the contributor has said he has had interaction with, and that's what I'd expect. You've got to go through the reported contributions. You comb through those lists. You look at individuals, organizations, and then you go out and anything that arouses or your suspicion or attracts your attention, you go out and you start pounding the pavement. You start talking to people, and then you start looking into further documentation, and you may subpoena, bank accounts and further records, because at the end of the day, you want to trace the transfer of funds. And again, as you noted at the outset, we've got an ongoing investigation. The special prosecutor for the state of Delaware has an ongoing investigation, so I'm not touching on anything here, but when you get the initial allegation from the person who says I've made conduit contributions or exceeded the contribution limits, these are the types of things you've got to look at and start to run after.
How difficult is it to make that case?
It's tough, and it's a point that that Mr. Kravitz made as part of his presentation, because not only do you have to follow the money, and even if you get it to a certain campaign or an individual, or you've got to demonstrate that there was a knowing receipt, that somebody on the other end knew that that the contributor was reimbursing his employees. And it's always the case for prosecutors, regardless of whether it's this kind of case, a tax case, a gun case, that proving knowledge, proving that the individual who acted had the appropriate mental state, that's a tough thing to prove. So, if you've got recorded statements, if you've got documentation demonstrating that somebody received an email and that email communicated something that demonstrates knowledge, those are good starters. But oftentimes it's one person's word against another, and in these kinds of cases, that in and of itself is not enough. You've got to corroborate any allegations like that.
So you'll need two people's words against another, three people, things like that. If you can get multiple witnesses or multiple testimony, that's strong. You can't just say, well, I overheard so-and-so say that this person did that. You've got to have somebody who says, oh, I was there, and I heard this happen.
That's exactly right. We always, more is better, and you always, multiple witnesses, documentation, recordings are great, and it depends upon, who's doing the talking. Some witnesses clearly are better than others. A witness who has, admitted illegal activity necessarily comes into that dynamic with some baggage. And it's often the case that that's the situation. So you've got to overcome that.
Generally, what's the timeline on an investigation like this? At what point do investigators/prosecutors say, yeah, you know what, we've been digging and we just can't get the corroborating evidence here that those people who benefited from this other person's illegal actions knew that he was acting illegally, or that there was perhaps some instruction from campaigns or other people saying, hey, here's how you do this illegally. Well, if you can't get that kind of corroboration, at what point do the investigators say, yeah, we're done?
Well, if you've run down all your leads and you've determined that you can't get that corroboration, well, you're not going to waste your time further pursuing it. However, there's no easy answer as to how long that process will take. It depends what information you've been provided with at the outset and what it is you're trying to prove. And generally speaking, we're going to run down all our leads until we're satisfied that we've spoken to all the people, we've looked at all the documentation, we've gotten all the records to satisfy us that the allegations that were initially presented to us cannot be substantiated. But until then, the only limitation we have is the statute of limitations on the offense itself.
What do you say to folks here in Delaware who say, U.S. attorneys, they're appointed, they're all part of the political problems we have, they're just going to cover up for the politicians, and they'll prosecute somebody in the private sector, but they're gonna cover up for the politicians. What do you say to those people? Well,
one thing I'd say is, in this particular circumstance, I'm not an appointed official. I'm a career prosecutor, at least, so yeah. Right now I happen to be acting in the capacity of U.S. Attorney, but I am not an appointed political official. I further say that, I can't get distracted by that. I mean, it's certainly, people can say that. I guess it's an easy way to dismiss, the work that any prosecutor's office does, particularly in this arena. But this office, I think, has earned a reputation, and I think we've earned it over a number of years, that we're going to go where the facts take us. And it's done without regard to partisanship or political party. It just, it happens to be in this case, Chris Tigani was a Greenville Republican who gave contributions, illegal contributions, to all kinds of candidates, Democratic candidates. So it certainly this set of facts crossed party lines.
That brings us to the Delaware way. The good side of the Delaware way, which prosecutor Robert Kravitz even talked about, is we have civilized, bipartisan approaches for finding solutions to the state's problems, and on the negative side, you got backroom deals, whether you're Republicans, Democrats, or whatever, for wealthy and politically connected folks here in Delaware. Do you really feel like this prosecution is going to squelch the kind of soft corruption we've seen here in the state?
No, I don't think it's going to squelch it. But as Rocky said in his comments, I think it's a first step. And obviously, I read the newspaper. I see what the initial reactions are. At least this is a topic that's being discussed at Legislative Hall. That's a good start. It has entered the psyche of our political process. That's a positive as far as we're concerned. Will it squelch it? Absolutely not. But it's a start, and we're going to continue our work. And our overall purpose in these kinds of cases, corruption, tax, because we know that we can't get all the activity, we can't prosecute all those who file false returns, is to send a message, is to deter this kind of stuff and to make people think twice before they engage in these activities, because they know, having watched this case, they know that there's a price to be paid.
We've seen some prosecutions in the state before, like with Newcastle County, for example, and you wonder, why is it that someone continues to do something that's illegal, might be something different than somebody in the previous administration, when they know that people are looking and people are going to investigate and people are going to prosecute? Does it frustrate you that you see some things happen like this in politics, and then, again, here's somebody else doing something illegal, and they should have known better because people are watching and they're going to report them?
Well, yeah, I guess I'd say it's frustrating, but this kind of activity, as you alluded to a moment ago, this has gone on in Delaware for some time, and certainly what Mr. Tigani told us supports that notion. I mean, he participated going back 8-9 years, and he used contributions and alcohol and tickets to events as a way to gain access and to exercise influence. And on many occasions, as he has said, he was successful in doing so.
Why did you feel he really should get 2 years? You said 25 months, actually. But why did you feel when he cooperated, he was playing along with you guys like you wanted him to, why did you feel he had to go to jail?
Well, we told Mr. Tigani from the outset that we were going to recommend jail time on this offense. Now, so we had a frank conversation when he initially came in and offered his cooperation. These are, this is serious stuff. It's a serious offense, and we knew from the outset that we needed to send a message. However, on the flip side, he did cooperate. He was candid and truthful in what he had to tell us, and we have an obligation, in fairness to him, to apprise the court of everything he has done, and we did so. But at the end of the day, there are other things we can do other than the recommendation we make. There are charges that we took a pass on from the outset that Mr. Kravitz referenced during the course of the sentencing proceeding. Mm-hmm. We decided not to pursue those things. We could have recommended at the top of the guidelines would have doubled Mr. Tigani's exposure. So we lessen our recommendation. We try to factor in all the aspects of what is fair under the circumstances, and we came out with 2 years. There's no science to it, but we try to be fair to the public and to the individual who has provided information to us.
He seemed to have some confidence that he could get home confinement and perhaps would not be sentenced. But what you're saying is, nope, from the very beginning, you said you were going to seek jail time.
And we communicated that. Now, Mr. Tigani and his attorney know that what we say, while we're strong advocates on behalf of the government's interests, the judge makes his own determination. And the judge, at the end of the day here, I think, was receptive to many of the arguments we made. But on a different case, under different circumstances, certainly judges will disagree with the government, with our perception. So, Mr. Tigani, I'm also confident that he expected to make his own pitch, and I don't know what he ultimately expected.
The investigation continues.
Absolutely.
In the private sector, the political sector, wherever it takes you. By the way, if you just tuned in, we have the acting U.S. attorney here on WDEL. We're talking about the Chris Tigani case. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison for violation of campaign finance laws. All right, David, I want to thank you for your time. And, anytime that, there's any break in the case or anything, I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, Rick, thank you.
And you know that we will be calling. Okay,
Appreciate it.
David Weiss, acting U.S. attorney here on the Tigani case on WDEL.